Okay. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. So we're having some technical issues. We are sorry for the waste in time. Unfortunately, I was not able to join on my team's account refused to allow me to enter the meeting. So we've been trying to sort that out. We haven't been able to sort it out still. So I'm actually on my colleague Constance on her team's account at the moment while we're still trying to figure out what happened, why I couldn't join. So we'll get right into it because we're already behind schedule. And this is supposed to be a hard 2 hours. Unfortunately, we've not been able to do that because of the technical problem that we had with joining on Teams. So we'll get right into it. Unfortunately, it has been a little bit disruptive, but we'll wing it through. So let me start first with a welcome address to you all. We thank you all for joining, both our panelists and the participants. First, talk about Nigeria NGO Forum. As a lot of you are aware, we're the coordinating body for international NGOs in Nigeria, and PLR CAP is a project under Nigeria NGO Forum, strictly focused on capacity building, capacity strengthening among local organizations, local actors in Nigeria. PLR CAP started in 2019, and since then, we've had various capacity strengthening projects with national and local NGOs and community-based organizations in Nigeria. About the NGO expert dialogue session, we've been running this for, I think, since 2023, when we had our first session. We usually have an expert come and have an interaction. We usually have an interactive session between experts and local organizations about capacity strengthening in different topic areas. But this time we decided to have more of a panel session where we want to talk about funding and funding challenges for local organizations in Nigeria. And the reason why we are doing this is, as we all know, the funding landscape in Nigeria has changed. And we felt that we needed to create a forum where everybody can have a conversation. You can hear from experts about what to expect in your planning in the future. We can also hear from you as well and know what is going on at the moment with you. How have you been funding your organization? Because aside from capacity strengthening in different areas of your organization, we also know that funding is a major need for local organizations. And then also look at it in terms of the grant bagging and localization. How have these efforts been going on since? What are the barriers? We know that everybody believes that the localization effort has not been 100% successful. Some would say maybe it's been 50% successful or less than that. So what are the barriers? And are there ways that we can overcome it? Also, what are ways that local organizations can also fund themselves? Because when we look at localization and we talk about the grant bagging, we're always talking about donors and donor relationships, but how can we be self-sufficient as local organizations in Nigeria? How can we overcome the challenge of funding our activities by getting more innovative ways of funding our organizations? So to have the conversation with us, we have our panelists, our esteemed panelists, and then we're also going to hear from organizations. We're also going to hear from you, and then we're going to also have a question and answer session. So with us, we have Ada James, localization and CSO specialist at Save the Children. Ada also coincidentally is also one of the founding members of PLR-CAP before he joined Save the Children. So we're happy to have him here with us again. We have Mr. Michael Peter Ebuda, who is the chairman coalition of Adamawa CSOs. We also have ST Sudyoko from the Office of Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. We have Oyebisi Babatunde Oluseyi, Executive Director, Nigerian Network of NGOs. And then we also have from the Nigerian government, Mohammed Ahmed, Special Assistant to the President, Special Duties, National Emergency Management. So welcome our panelists, and then we'll go right into the conversation. I believe that the agenda had been shared with you earlier. Constance, was that shared on the agenda? It wasn't shared. Okay. Okay, so the agenda has not been shared, unfortunately, because of the issues that we had earlier with our organization, with teams. So I'll just walk you through how we are going to go. We're going to have a panel conversation with a couple of questions for our panelists, and then shortly after that, we'll have 3 national NGOs speak with us about their experiences. And then after that, we'll open the conversation to the general participants to also give us their opinions. Just to mention that this session is a learning session. It's not, how would I put it? It's not a political session. We're not discussing politics. We're all here to learn from each other. So when we're making our contributions and when we're talking, everybody should bear that in mind and look at it from a position of us having a conversation among experts in the sector and among organizations as well to find a way forward. Ultimately, our objective is to figure ways that we can improve our operations and also the fundings of local and national NGOs. So with that, I'm opening the floor and I'm starting with Ada James. Maybe you can add a quick introduction about himself, and then we'll go with asking Ada. To Ada James, are you around?
Yes, I am here. Hi, good morning, our esteemed colleagues on the call, and good morning, NDBC and Constance. Thank you for having me on this. And over to you, Andy.
All right, thank you, Ada. So my question for you, Ada, is to talk about 1 second. Okay, just 1 second. Yeah. So my question for you, Ada, from your perspective, how does the changing funding reality affect and impact the localization agenda in Nigeria?
Okay, thank you very much, Andy, for that question. And once again, thanks everyone for joining this session today. So the change in funding landscape in Nigeria, and in fact the globe as a whole, comes with a lot of challenges and opportunities. And I think I would want to look at the opportunities more than the challenge, recognizing the fact that, yeah, the challenge is obvious, that issues around abrupt closure of programs, downsizing and right-sizing of both national and international staff, or both international partners as well as local partners, as well as, and also limited access to services for the vulnerable people in need of assistance. We cannot neglect this fact. We cannot deny this reality that come with the cut in funding as well. but then I want to believe that it offers an opportunity for us to look beyond the challenge and see more or more opportunity, or see how we can kind of create more uh, uh, impact, create more impact, build resilience, and kind of re-strategize. And so I think what I've seen so far from the reality of the situation, the court has significantly forced donors, UN agencies, and international partners to consider working more with local partners. So in recent time, you see more of consortiums being formed between local consortiums that have local and international partners working, as well as UN agencies working together in program implementation and different kind of programs. Also, you see donors are now devising means to fund local partners directly. Uh, yeah, many you see different initiatives that are coming up, different funding strategies that are being piloted now to ensure that local partners are directly getting funding from donors. Also, you see local partners now are being involved in decision making. They are now included in decision making, most especially the recent equitable membership of local partners on the humanitarian country team is a practical example of local partners now being in position of decision making, are fully participating and contributing to decision around humanitarian responses and development-related intervention in the country. And so localization is now being prioritized in project and proposal designs. You see donors now insisting on localization component in proposal design and call for application. You see that there are now donors are now being intentional about specifying or target a kind of funding program or initiative that are designed with a critical component of localization. And also we can kind of relate this reality to the most recent development with the Nigerian Humanitarian Fund being channeled, almost 60% of it being channeled to local partners based on the report of the 2023 humanitarian fund. Also, international partners are now lending their voice to advocate for localization, including development of localization strategies by different NGOs and other international partners to see how they can contribute to localization. And yeah, unlike what it was before now, the traction for localization is increasing and more partners are now keying into it, re-strategizing their approach, especially in the wake of reality of the cuts in funding and the downsizing and resizing of their structure, as well as taking an approach of working with the local partners in a manner that will increase their impact, considering the reality that local partners it has been proven that local partners are kind of more, how do I think, they're more, let's say, with a little amount of funds, easier for local partners to reach more beneficiaries as compared to as compared to other counterparts in this space. So I think the traction for working with local partners is now increasing, and more organizations, even those that are not signatories to the grant bargain, are now putting effort together to come up with a strategy that allow them to adopt localization agenda in their approach. Not to also mention the value of investment made in strengthening local capacity by donors and international partners across the country. So for me, I can say in summary that the changing landscape has significantly bring a positive impact into the space, have helped both partners to build a kind of, resilience to the changing dynamics and re-strategize approach that will help to impact program. And I can also look at it from the perspective of the local actors. More and more of them are realizing and coming up with, strategy to look within, no longer looking more of going outside to look for partner, to look for opportunities for funding and all that. They're now concentrating more on private, looking at what is obtainable within the private sector, what is obtainable within the philanthropical space, looking at the instance of what happened in the during the most recent flood case in Borno State. You see more of Nigerian philanthropies and private contributing to response to the disaster in the state. And so it shows that there is opportunity to tap also in the private sector and philanthropy space within Nigeria to mobilize resources, which I believe that the local partners are also seeing and keying into this opportunity from what we've seen so far in the recent time. Thank you, and over.
All right. Thank you so much, Ada, for that perspective. I also want to ask you, what have been, just briefly because of time, what do you think have been the main barriers in achieving true localization in the past?
Okay, the barrier in the past, yeah, there are a lot of factors that are associated with the progress in localization in Nigeria. And I think one of the major barrier I can see, in quote, is lack of common understanding of the localization, of the entire localization concept. So every partners and stakeholders within the space have a different definition for localization, and so they approach localization from different perspectives, and there is no kind of shared understanding or common agreeable definition, understanding of what localization is. So everybody is throwing his own piece into the system in the name of localization, and that significantly is impacting ability to make a significant progress. Also, another aspect is the fact that there is no well-defined structure for measuring the progress in localization. And so, although recently the coalition of civil society working with IGVA, the coalition of civil society in Adamawa State, working with IGVA are trying to come up with localization barometer in Nigeria, which I think is a giant step towards ensuring that the progress is being tracked. And so with that, we can be able to see. Also, the national localization framework is an important document that significantly the awareness of it and stakeholders keying into the provision of the strategies also a concern that significantly impact the progress of the localization in Nigeria. Not to take away the fact that there is this existing perception of local partners not being trustworthy or considered as high risks and all that. In addition to the fact that equitable partnership, there is no well-defined framework or structure to kind of say what exactly is equitable partnership. And so you see partnership where local partners are not given opportunity to receive the like of flexible funds such as the indirect cost recovery to support them on the same grant that the implementing partners have access to indirect costs, but they are not translating this down to the local partners. Also, some donors, even though we recognize the fact that some other donors have made it a theme of policy, insist that for every grant they are giving out, the implementing partner must translate the same structure or similar structure of ICR to the local partners. This is only it's only associated to just few out of many other donors. So donor policies around access to some flexible fund for local partners also have significant impact on the progress of localization, because no matter how much capacity you build,
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ada. Please, for the participants, you can please write your name and your organization in the chat box so that we can know those who are online with us. Okay, thank you very much for your contribution, Ada. You said some interesting things about a localization fund with the private sector contributing to that. We'll get back to that. It sounds very interesting. And then also speaking about a little bit of a pushback from international NGOs on localization. That's also something that I might want to revisit or have other panelists talk about. So the next person that we're going to, on our panel that we're going to, and then also for our participants, please keep your questions. We'll also have a question and answer session very soon. So you can also ask other questions about what he has just told us at the moment. So we'll move to Peter. Peter, are you online? Peter Ebuda, are you okay? All right.
Yes. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you. Yeah. So, Peter, can you tell us about how, first of all, to say Peter is the chairman coalition of Adamawa CSOs, and then he's also been involved in the creation of the localization barometer. So, I want to hear from Peter about what's been happening with our local CSOs in the affected regions. How are they responding to this changing funding landscape? And in general, how have they been in your coalition? How has their access to funding been in the recent past? And then how have they been responding to the changing funding landscape?
Okay, thank you, NWC, for this opportunity, and I welcome all my colleagues. To start with, the funding gap has impacted negatively in our operations, especially the local NGOs who are operating in the Bay States. Adamawa State, where I'm seated right now, is one of the most affected locations, and NGOs operating within this location are finding it very difficult. Currently, as we speak, the reduction of funding means that the gaps are widening, less of manpowers in the field. The INGO communities are scaling down. Some of them total shut down. Some have reduced by 70%, 60%, as the case may be. We even have cases of outbreak of opportunistic diseases in our communities as we speak currently. And this is because a lot of the actors now have pulled back because of paucity of funds. And as you know, the local NGOs are the receiving end most times. They are the ones on ground working in communities with little resources. So in terms of coping mechanisms that we've adopted all this while, and you know, we've been talking about localization for a very long time now, we've actually asked our members to work in consortium most times. And that is one of the saving grace we are having at the moment. Some of the funding we've had before the freeze on funds by the United States government allows members to work in consortium of 2, 3, or 4 organizations, as the case may be, in different sectors operating in communities, either in wash sector, livelihood sector, food security, protection, and every other sector that they find themselves. So that we've been doing, we've been encouraging our members to work more collaboratively and work more closely with the government, because our hosts, in this case, whether a subnational or national government, they also have some kind of resources and expertise that they bring to the table. So we are looking outside of the box, not just at talking straightly to the donors this time around, but also talking with partners in the public sector. And if need be, we intend to even expand to talking to private sectors. And I think this is also going to change the way of work and the way we do things moving forward. The notion that the non-profit organization should not be in business, I think, should stop. This is my own personal observation, because we pay tax, we pay all the revenues that is accrued to anybody who is operating a business organization. So, and when we say we are not non-for-profit, does that also mean that we cannot get ourselves involved in income generating activities to help organizations in times like this? So there are a lot of plethora of options are on the table for us to look at. But at the moment, one of the things we are doing, and we're doing very well, is working in consortium among ourselves, using our own resources where we have strengths, leveraging on each other to ensure that we work in communities where we have strength. For instance, local NGOs in Nigeria, some are community-based organizations. I'll give you an example with one of the hard-to-reach locations in Adamawa State, which is Madagali and Michika. We have members who are operating in that location. They have offices there. They have staff who are indigenous to those local governments. So what that means is that you are not, the cost of logistics has been reduced. You don't have to fly in somebody with on-house. You don't have to move somebody from Yola to move to those locations to operate, because these guys are seated there, they're domiciled with those locations. They understand the context and the operation strategy to implement their project in a very cost-effective manner, compared to when an INGO will have to move from Abuja, come to Yola, or go to Meduguri or Yobe to implement. So these are options we have on the table. And again, it allows us also to start looking at the localization agenda, as it were. You know, before now, we've all talked about it, either from the INGO, end or from the UN end. We've always talked about it, but we've not really given it that push. Perhaps this is an opportunity for us to start walking the talk and putting our money where our mouth is. For 8 years, we've been talking about the grand bargain at the highest level of humanitarian action in the world, the UN system. Everybody is talking about it, but progress, appreciable or substantive, significant progress was not made. So I think this is an opportunity for us now as humanitarian actors operating in hard-to-reach locations like the Northeast Nigeria, and maybe now perhaps the Northwest is also coming on board, that we have to start looking at the localization agenda, look at the framework. How does it suit us? What can we do differently? How do we harness our own in-house resources to ensure that we operate? And finally, it will also help us to look at the humanitarian development peace nexus that we've also talked about all this while, and we've not really made serious progress. Because at the end of the day, as Nigerians that we are, the onus of holding our government accountable lies with us as citizens. So what have been the role of government in all these years? How do they spend their budget? Do they really spend budget in critical areas that the masses need? So whether we are humanitarians or development actors, we are citizens of a country, and the responsibility of holding our government accountable lies with us. So sometimes what we're actually looking for from America, UK, Canada, and the rest is domiciled in our house. It's in-house. So we should also start looking at government, how to make our budget processing, our budget implementation much more transparent and accountable to the ordinary people who are the most affected and the most needy in the society. Over.
Thank you so much, Mr. Peter, for that contribution. Luckily, we have Mohammed from the government to also speak on regarding what you raised about the government also being an important player in how we support our local and national NGOs. I'll come back to you, Peter, but before then, let me bring on Mr. Oyebisi, because he just messaged me that he's on the move, and the network he has around this area is not so good. So let's have him speak, because we don't know how long we might have him on board. Mr. Oyebisi, are you around?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate. Mr. Oyebisi, for those who do not know him, is the Executive Director of Nigeria Network of NGOs. Mr. Oyebisi, to build on the questions that we asked Peter earlier, we would like to ask you, I know that a lot of the work that you do in your organization has to do with advocacy. Can you walk us through how local and national CSOs can collaborate to advocate for alternative funding sources and policy reforms? We already, Ada had already mentioned something about private sector funding, and Peter is also talking about governments being more involved. So we want to hear your opinion about what you think about these suggestions and any other suggestions that you have in terms of advocating for reform in how we fund our local and national NGOs.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak, and thanks to my brothers that have spoken ahead of me. Mine also is to say we are in a time where we now all understand that civil society is a vital source of hope and resilience, and that optimism must remain our guiding light. Even amidst all of these challenges, we want to stay optimistic, and that's why my conversation also will focus on the side of optimism. Advocacy, as it were, for our sector and also in terms of funding would require a lot of sense making, but also require a lot of policy innovations. One has already been alluded to by my brother, Mr. Peter, who said that, see, how can I be a nonprofit and not be able to, invest or, do some trade? And the policy innovation there, and where the advocacy would come, is how we transit from incorporated trustees to limited by guarantee within CAMA, such that we do not lose the name that we've already registered with. So it requires us sitting down with the regulators, advocating to them on the importance of incorporated trustees being able to move to limited by guarantee. That is one. The second is the advocacy that we now need to focus on around skills-based volunteering, where we begin to look for individuals who have the skill that we need in the sector and who would be happy to formally volunteer with us, giving us 1 hour, 2 hours of their time in such a way that we can progress on the type of human resources that we need for us to do our work effectively as nonprofits. Then also, we need a national conversation on the CSR that the private sector gives out. But this is not going to be a process of, we have to balance understanding, collaboration, and also with confrontation when, sitting with the private sector. What value add are we bringing to them in ways that helps them reprioritize their CSR towards the good work that we do? Also understanding that many of them already have foundations that they are using as vehicle for them to deliver on this. So it will require some level of maturity, both on the part of civil society and the private sector, to be able to advance this. The other is also how we think through fundraising, both as an act and also as a role that we must now have within our various organizations. But also understanding that we will now need standards that helps us to fundraise effectively, but in ways that doesn't upset the general public. Linking that also to the public trust that is needed for us to be able to fundraise effectively from the public. What we are seeing now is that, the most reliable sources of funding for our work is now becoming unpredictable, and that is, aid. But how do we incentivize giving so that individuals, communities can give to our work? But when they give, how do they get tax waivers or tax incentives? And this is another policy area where we need to be smart, we need to be agile, and we need to sit down with our regulators to see how this can work. We do also need to pay attention to how laws are being made at the subnational level and issues around budget as well. Because if we can advocate for the inclusion of support to service-based nonprofits by governments, that then makes enough sense. But also not only budgeting, but allocating resources to service-based nonprofits who will then use, service-based nonprofits usually have less interest in advocacy. They are more or less in delivering services, all right? So how do we get the subnationals to budget for that? Of course, using the narrative that when you walk through a nonprofit, you are getting more value for money and that you are spending less because of the ways that we work as nonprofits. So again, quick high level, we need to look at CAMA. How can CAMA allow us to transit between trusteeship to limited by guarantee so that we can have social enterprises? How can we also incentivize our tax laws in ways that allows us to be able to raise funds from individuals? But we won't be able to do that if we also don't have a strong accountability and transparent system. But the other bit is also how do we grow local philanthropy? How do our high net worth individuals give big gifts to causes that they believe in, such that when they do this also, there's an enabling environment for them to be able to do this. Because again, philanthropists have a role, and vehicle of foundations that they've also used have a role in helping us to get the needed resources. Don't forget that we won't get all of the resources from these people. So that's why we need multiple structures of resources that can help us. Lotteries is also another area where we now need to improve our advocacy. The national lottery law, I think there's a clause there that says that we can lottery funds, for those who can accept it, can be used for development. How are those resources used? And how do we begin to think through how to access them? So let me drop here for a while and see whether my connection will still allow me. I am roaming, and I do not know how many minutes I have left. Over to you.
Mr. Kanu, you're muted. You're muted.
All right, thank you very much. Sorry for that. Okay, thank you very much for your very insightful presentation. So one thing that has been going through with all this conversation, I can see that we've spoken about local philanthropy, private organizations, and then people have also spoken about government. So fortunately, we have a representative of the government here to speak with us, and we have a few questions to ask him also. So firstly, we want to know, just 1 second, please. Okay. So we want to know, Mr. Mohammed Ahmed, that given the current situation, with donor funding at the moment, are there plans by the Nigerian government, and have there already been plans? So first of all, like, what do we have currently in terms of how the government supports local and national organizations? And then also going forward, considering this peculiar situation that we have at the moment, are there future plans also for how to support these local humanitarian and national NGOs?
Thank you very much, Mr. Kanu, and I'm pleased to be here with all our participants. Your questions are, I think they're really cogent questions. But before I respond, I would like to appreciate both the two previous speakers, Mr. Peter and our senior colleague, Professor Oyebisi. We've awarded him a honorary professorship this morning because he touched on very, very, very important, discussions, shifts that are happening globally. They're not peculiar to Nigeria. Looking inward has become a trend. There are shifts in multilateralism. There are shifts in governance structures. So policy innovation is actually very prominent up there. And I think that's what he started his intervention with, policy innovation. And it has to happen across all, the different sectors that make up society. That is, from industry and academia and civil society, and indeed in government. There has to be a shift in the way we do business. It's no secret that this 21st century is the most volatile and unpredictable period in the Anthropocene. It's very, very peculiar, in the human society. So, to be very brief, and before I even jump again, you said I'm a representative of government. Well, government is a representative of the people. So I'm also speaking as a voice, a Nigerian, and somebody who is concerned about the most vulnerable, where Mr. Peter alluded to the fact that the local NGOs are the ones that are most hit by this funding, restriction. I actually feel otherwise, that it's the vulnerable communities and not the local NGOs that are most hit. So I am speaking as a voice for those vulnerable communities, our citizenry. So yes, in terms of what government at both the national and subnational level, what they've been doing, it's already again been highlighted. There is a Nigeria localization framework. I'm pleased to remind us that some subnationals have actually gone ahead to translate that Nigeria localization framework into an actionable policy at their state level. Case in point, the Borno state have existing policies that drive at domesticating, if you'd like, local content or localization at their level. And I think other base states as well, and even maybe Benue state. The grand ambition with that would be how to, take insights and learnings from what they are doing in these Bay states, and scale them, and translate them into specific sectors or other states. We also have, for instance, I believe, action plan on if it's child protection, which was developed again with Northeast states, and this focuses on child protection. So many different things are happening. Another ambition would be for how to take these fragmented and siloed efforts and consolidate them, and drive really at maybe a national action plan that strengthens localization or government's position on localization. In terms of sector-specific, actions or interventions, we do have in the health sector, for instance, the Ministry of Health has rolled out a sector-wide approach to the way it conducts, health policy and health implementation of health policies. And what that seeks to do is to ensure there's alignment between what the national policy is and what the funding imperative is for everyone. So even if you come as a donor, or the funding is aligned to specific government policies or programs. It removes that things working in silos, and there's a what you call a global direction in terms of where spending is done. It provides mechanisms for accountability and transparency. Also, I think just about a week ago, this time last week, the office where I work, the Office of the Vice President, received the UN OCHA and the UN resident coordinator, and together with some of our key institutions, the National Emergency Management Agency, the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, the Nigeria Meteorological Agency, we've sort of launched a locally led task force on anticipatory action, specifically looking at flooding. It's no secret that flooding and the intervention and response to flooding has always been reactive. And for the first time, we're looking at how do we consolidate the strengths of our local institutions. And here, I'm not really talking about civil society, I know. I'm talking about national government institutions to stay ahead of the curve in terms of the response effort to, even the preparedness to flooding. Now, what you would have is, at the subnational level, our actors can then key into that also and allow, because ultimately the point is to mitigate the suffering to community, to those, vulnerable communities, especially, or exposed communities. So sometimes, which brings me to point out that sometimes when you're talking about government's role, you do have structures in government. Central government cannot be everywhere. Central government cannot be in that local community in Adamawa. And its role is really to set the policy, which now translates through structures of government or branches of government or relevant ministries, departments, and agencies and interministerial committees. And that said, it is the role of civil society to now key into what government policies and the direction that government policies are taking. This leads me to respond to your second part of your question. Going forward into the future, how does government intend to ensure civil society? You're alluding to participation, and especially within the localization agenda. Mr. Peter pointed, and I think raised an important issue around budgetary accountability, and transparency of the budgetary process, and fiscal responsibility, right? Now, indeed, that is right, because that government budgets remain the single most mechanism or instrument for government spending. So if we're going to move away from international donor funding, then we need to key more into available government resources. And by the way, the government budgets are becoming more tighter. We have resource deficits, and it's not peculiar to Nigeria again. And that's why some of the countries that had very open purses to us are looking inward, because they are prioritizing themselves. And that's why we have this reawakening, if you'd like. So it has brought to the fore the need to be fiscally responsible and ensure efficiency in service delivery. I'm pleased to note that Nigeria is actually, it's in the fourth phase of developing. There's an open government partnership, which we signed onto during the previous administration. And this open government partnership is a partnership between government and civil society. And Nigeria is one of, I think, about 139 other countries that are signatories on this. And the commitments made on that partnership also seek to strengthen civil society's role in being part of the budgetary process, being part of measures to ensure accountability of service delivery. So in Nigeria's case, we're talking about Servicom. So I think the point I'm trying to make is to urge the continued participation of civil society. Since government has opened up to say, okay, we are open to that participation, then it's now the imperative is now on civil society to continue to be that voice that always, if you like, in the realms of government, you have the fourth realm, I think, which is media, that is there to provide checks and balances and question government action. And I think similarly, civil society has that role to ensure our budgets, we have accountability, we have fiscal responsibility, and the right resources, which are becoming ever more trimmed, put into the right places. So I'll leave it at that for now, and thank you for the opportunity once again.
Thank you very much. I'm also curious, just taking from what some of our speakers had said earlier, in terms of the CSOs, who we all know are doing a lot of good work, are there in the communities, implementing different interventions. So right now, we obviously know that there's a gap in funding that's going to happen based on the current landscape, what is happening in the current landscape. Is there any, currently, does government work with CSOs and local organizations as implementers? I think Mr. ABC mentioned something about that, saying some of these things we can deliver them cheaper and more effectively. We've already been doing these things for a while. Is there any system currently in place, and is it a possibility that if such does not exist now, going forward, to replace, or rather to assist these organizations going forward who are having so much problem in terms of funding? Is there a way government can intervene in working with some of these organizations directly in the future, if that is not happening presently?
Yes, so indeed, again, I'd like to buttress the fact that the role of government, okay, so there are structures in government that implement interventions. So, but then at the highest level of government, you're talking about policy making, not implementation. I will not speak to what the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs is doing in terms of how is it working with civil society to implement some of its policies and some of its programs. And I would like to believe that they do work with civil society in rolling out, if it's conditional cash transfers or some feeding programs and or that sort of thing. But at the highest level of government, we work in policy development. For instance, you know, the recently developed state action plan on durable solutions to the internal displaced persons. So if government has established that and it's been rolled out to subnational level, I don't think it's now the role of the Office of the Vice President. Of course, we will have reporting mechanisms and, you know, system to ensure, you know, these things are done, but the actual implementation will be left to subnational. And even within subnational, I believe the direct interface will with civil society will be through some other arms of government, maybe local government or some ministries at subnational level. So I cannot really point you out to specific situations, and I don't, you know, I don't want to run the risk of being misquoted, but it is, I would like to believe strongly that various interventions will, with government and civil society, definitely will exist. Just the same way that it was highlighted that during the previous flooding, we had private sector or philanthropy, you know, leading some of the interventions. I would like to believe that even within their own structure, they will work with civil society groups that have boots on ground to actually roll out some of their interventions. So similarly with government. I hope this has answered and you know, provides some sufficient response to your question.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the answer. So we will move to ST. ST, are you available?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. Yeah. So ST is from, yeah, you're welcome. Good to see you. Yeah. So ST is from OCHA, and we just want to ask you, ST, how can international organizations and Nigerian government work together to sustain humanitarian efforts despite this changing landscape? Specifically in terms of, I mean, this could be an answer, but yeah, in terms of convening, is there a way that international organizations and Nigerian government can work together to sustain the humanitarian work that is being done despite this situation that we have now?
Thank you so much. Firstly, thank you for the opportunity, and it's such a privilege to be on this panel. And also to colleagues before me speaking with such expertise and such knowledge. Thank you to Mohammed Ahmed from the government before, and Save the Children, and James, Peter. All the issues have come up. And just to let you know also, this the funding constraints that we're seeing right now is not limited to Nigeria. Just for you to know, the humanitarian funding constraints right now is global. And so don't think that it's limited to Nigeria. This situation on funding to humanitarian action is something that is being spoken all over and is leading to something called a reset. And so these challenges are something of an opportunity for all of us. And when you talk about localization, it is something that is not new either. And when you talk about these funding constraints, and it's time for us to rethink, and the opportunities and the efforts, it's been happening in Nigeria even before the funding constraints. We have been trying to make sure that the local leadership and the local ownership is with you from the very beginning. So even 2016, when it's the World Humanitarian Summit, and you know that when things occur, the frontliners and the ones who are the first responders are local actors and is the government. And you all mentioned it at the very beginning, the first responders and the duty bearers is the government, as Mohammed Ahmed mentioned and James was mentioning. So it's not a science of having local leadership and local ownership. And Peter mentioned it. Who has the local knowledge? Who has the local expertise? Who has the who are your neighbors? Who has the language? Who knows the area the best? And what was the terminology that was used in 2016 at the World Humanitarian Summit about localization was as local as possible, as international as necessary. So it is always as local as possible. So the closest you are in the local context, it's the best. And context matters. So I think also Peter mentioned, if it's in Katsina, then it should be from Katsina, not from Lagos. If it's in Sokoto, then it should be from Sokoto, again, not from Abuja. So the local actors, and that helps with transfer of knowledge, that helps with risks, that helps with security, that helps with language, etc. And again, the best in terms of anticipatory action, as our government colleague was talking about, it's what works best in terms of systems. We try to work as best we can with the LGA chairman. We try to work as best we can with state governments. And he mentioned the meeting with the HCRC and with OCHA at the highest level, and that is the policy. Here we're also talking about funding constraints and anticipatory action and preparedness. That's supposed to reduce funding. But, you know, funding as a response comes into action, it's more expensive. And if you can anticipate or if you can mitigate, it becomes less, but you need to invest. And when you talk about private sector, we've tried to do this also with private sector. Private sector is more into profit. So you're talking about return on investment, and they don't want to invest on something that is volatile, as in the Northeast. You know, it's still not something that they can invest in because it's still volatile. The security is still not something that they can invest in, but they can invest in people. They can invest in something like capacity. We always say that capacity building and program comes from a different pot of money. It's a different skill set. Training people and training how to do WASH and training how to do food security and training how to deliver are two different skill sets and should come from two different pots of money. Like a program like PLR CAP is a different pot of money and different skill set than training someone to do WASH, technical water and sanitation, or health. And so when you're talking about working with the private sector, it's not only about asking for money to do programming, it's also how to do capacity building in terms of human resources. Like, how do you do consulting firms with Ernst & Young or Price Waterhouse on management, on consulting firms, how to do organizational development with your NGOs, with your local capacity on how to do writing or how to do organizational development, as we were saying. And so building the capacity of CSOs, building the capacity of NGOs is also something else. Or even, Mohammed, building the capacity of your LGA chairman, leadership training, how to do organizational, how to do structures in government. And again, you have those amazing Ernst & Young, Price Waterhouse, all these other, Boston Consulting in Lagos, who may be able to do that also pro bono. I don't know, those kinds of things. So your private sector does not have to limit itself in funding, but also in human resources capacity. And how we work with the government, again, in technical capacity, we work through disaster management, we work through anticipatory action, in technical capacities for, again, search and rescue, perhaps. We have a lot of tools in these issues, how to reduce the cost of response so that we can do it in maybe man-hours, manpower, in all sorts of different ways. We've talked also about these things with the CSOs and the NGO community of imagining an environment of response where there are no UN agencies, where there are no NGOs, where the only capacity is local NGOs and CSOs. So now you have to think about your capacity. Is your capacity enough to respond? Do you have the capacity and the technical skills to respond yourself? So that's where you need to build your own capacity, because you're not competing with NGOs or UN agencies, either for money or to be able to help your people, because that's exactly what with what Mr. Mohammed Ahmed was saying about, it's not the NGOs that are hit hard, it's the people that are hit hard, because we're here to help them. So do you have the capacity to help them? Do you have the technical capacity, the fiduciary capacity to be able to help them? So now you have to build your capacity to help them. And I think this is the perfect opportunity, the perfect challenges to also work with academia. I think somebody mentioned academia. It's been 15 years where you have been experiencing firsthand the ability to be experts in disaster management, conflict resolution, humanitarian assistance. Your universities are well known to be the best amongst the world. So you can work together with universities in the UK, in Singapore, in Kenya, in South Africa, and build the best programs on disaster management, on conflict resolution, and have programs. And imagine the youth of Nigeria being in the programs and becoming experts on these, and then having the capacity themselves and having professors of these special fields and courses of disaster management and conflict resolution, and then really building that capacity. So then you are already very qualified, and on that you can also become so these are, again, opportunities to make yourselves qualified and have the accreditation. And that's what we're looking for, your own organizations being accredited. So you have your own self-assessments right now, which may not reach that, but you can actually get accredited yourselves and be accredited globally. And have that acknowledgement universally that you are validated to be experts on what you are experiencing firsthand, on hand, that you have risk, you have conflict resolution, conflict management, etc. So you can have these programs integrated into your own while you're actually working. I hope that gives some ideas of what can be done. I'll stop there. Maybe I've spoken too much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Esti. We'll have a question and answer session. So I hope you have been taking down notes on things that you want to ask the panelists. If you put them up, if you put your questions in the chat, we will get to your questions soon. So if you have questions, please type them into the chat and we'll take on your questions. We'll call up people based on the questions that we see in the chat box. So please, you can put up your questions now. So we have the next session that we're going to go into is going to be to hear from organizations on the ground to tell us their experiences, and then also tell us about the opportunities they have they can see on ground, and the challenges that they have, and talk about the work that they do. So we're going to call up Susie from Siricare. If Constance, Susie, can you raise your hand so that we can see you, and then we can give you the opportunity to speak. Okay, all right. I can see her hand. So let's unmute. Can you unmute? Allow me. All right. I think you can speak now, Susan.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Okay, great. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Susan Tanwe. I'm the founder and executive director of Siricare Foundation, and it's a women-led foundation or organization founded in 2020, and we have offices in Adamawa and Borono. So I want to first of all thank the panelists for the great insights that they gave us. It's been very, very insightful and a learning process. So Siricare Foundation, we have as a mission, to dedicating to safeguarding, preempting, and empowering women and girls through provision of accessible support services, and also to advocate for gender equality, and also to cultivate a culture of resilience and collective advancement. So for Siricare Foundation, we have thematic areas around protection, child protection, gender-based violence, education, early recovery and livelihoods, peace building and governance, and good governance. So Siricare actually is currently implementing a project, a GBV and livelihood project in Gombe and Maiha LGS of Adamawa State, where we are carrying out GBV case management and also supporting survivors with medical support, mental health and psychosocial support, and access to justice. And we have also trained young women and girls in the production of reusable sanitary pads. Over the years, Siricare Foundation has adopted the approach of community-based, and for us, it is more like to ensure that there is community participation and ownership. And this is why we go basically with community-based approaches. So we currently being funded by the Nigerian Humanitarian Funds through the other national organization, Gibran Books and Value Society of Nigeria. So even though the funding is closing up by the end of this month, I would still like to appreciate our donor and also our partner for the support that they've provided to us throughout this project implementation. Aside the funding, it was actually a 1-year project, a 12 months project. We've had a lot of capacity strengthening within this project, and I really appreciate our partners and donor for this. So I would want to speak a little bit as far as the funding environment is concerned, and the discussion, to add a little bit on the discussion that has been ongoing. I know, and I would want to align myself with most of the panelists who are also of the opinion that the frozen funding from the USA has really created, an even more better opportunity for especially national organizations, and also, I would say, youth-led organization and women-led organization like ours, because now we have seen several different fora where youth-led and women-led, as well as nascent organizations, have been invited, to join in the decision making processes, and also looking for better ways to, realign the localizations strategies of both the state or even the nation, and as well as other international organizations. So I feel like this is a better opportunity for women-led or nascent women-led organizations like that of a Sirike Foundation to really tap into this opportunity and see how they can spread, they can spread their tentacles even more, looking not just within, like others have said, but also looking at diversifying the different funding sources, because what we have realized over the years is that we focus on the major and well-known funding bodies within our environment, and we do not, tap into other opportunities that are very well present for us. So with this, I feel like we have now become more aware of the fact that irrespective of the fact that we are national organizations, we are now being given attention, so much attention. There is so much intentionality in engaging national partners in not just decision making, but also in finding different ways where we can, tap into our individual resources and continue to support the communities that we are working for. For Sirike Foundation, we have since the freezing of funding, we have actually, as an organization, joined different consortia where we now have to look at these opportunities in different directions. For instance, the project that we are currently rounding up is a project that we are implementing the protection component, while Gibran is implementing the education component. So these are opportunities where you can, we can tap into, even in other thematic areas. Like I mentioned, we have different thematic areas. So it will help us to, not just focus on one funder, but several other funders to increase our scope. Through the PLR CAP, I think Sirike Foundation has been a beneficiary of the PLR CAP capacity strengthening program. And over the period, we have really had some lessons learned, and in trying to implement some of these lessons learned. Of course, there are bottlenecks, such as in terms of social capital, and also looking at what the senior colleagues from Adamawa mentioned concerning having a kind of a profit that would, help to build the organization even without funding. How else can we as an organization generate some funding that can sustain our activities, even without donor funding? So we as an organization, we have all of these sustainability plans in place to scale up our activities, but then we are also limited because we don't want to find ourselves in the web where we now say, okay, Kama, this is what Kama says about this, and this is what we have to do as a non-profit organization. So we are now in that web. So I would want to also add my voice to what the professor said around having advocacy to see how we can, how national organizations or NGOs, non-profit organizations, can actually transfer from trusteeship to limited by guarantee. This will help us, especially women-led organizations. We already know the challenges that we have as women-led organizations, the competition that is already there. And then not talk of now that, the funding has dwindled, there is donor fatigue and all. How else can we step in as women-led organizations to see how we can continuously support our communities even without funding? So I want to say that advocacy, like I said earlier, is one of the strategies that Sirike Foundation is also tapping into to see how we can continually put in more efforts to supporting are beneficiaries. I don't know. Yeah, I've spoken a little bit about the challenges, which is the resources, and also I've spoken about the being beneficiaries of local or localization strategy in different ways. We've actually been supported by another national organization, Go Prime. Go Prime supported us with capacity strengthening for a period of 6 months. And at the end of that capacity strengthening, yes, our capacity was strengthened within this period. However, turning this capacity into actionable actions became another problem because there was that challenge of limited resources. Because I always advocate that once we work on localization, we should ensure that these national partners that are going through the localization process, that are going through the capacity building phases, they should at least be given some form of seed grants where they can actually turn the whole process into actionable practices. This way, it will help the organization to not just have the theory about the whole process of localization, but also to, have a feel of how this can, these processes, this whole beautiful policies, theoretical knowledge that we've achieved can, be used on the field. And also another thing I would want to say is the fact that as a woman-led organization, there is this, we now have the opportunity that the focus is slowly being tilted towards us. So we should tap into this and ensure that we as national women-led organizations, we build our capacities, we position ourselves in such a position where if the localization strategy is being implemented, we should be at the forefront to be able to access it. Because even if a donor comes with funding and they want to focus on national partners on localization to fund us, they would want to, give funding to those that have capacities, those that have placed themselves in a position where they can actually receive this funding and make the most of it and ensure that communities benefit the most from this. And we as women-led organizations, we have always been the ones that have been at the forefront of these interventions, and we know how best to go about this. So if we know how best to go about it, how about positioning ourselves? How about putting in our governance structures in place, our financial structures in place, administrative structures in place, such that if these resources are coming, we are well positioned to receive them. I don't know, maybe I'm already speaking against time, but I'll be also available for questioning. Thank you very much, and over.
Thank you. It's very interesting to listen to you. We were supposed to allow 2 other organizations to also speak, but unfortunately, because of our technical issues when we started, we wouldn't be able to do that anymore. So we want to open to questions and answers. I can't see a lot of questions in the chat box. So I'll start with the one that I have here. Let's see. So Musa Usman is asking, how can local and national organizations diversify their funding sources? Which of our panelists wants to go with that? I'd say Mr. Oyebisi, if he's available, because he spoke about this. Is he still available, or is he roaming? Okay, he isn't. So does any of our panelists want to take on that? Ada, you want to take on that?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Andy. So how can the local partner diversify their source of funding? I think this question, even though, as you earlier mentioned, my senior colleague, ABC, I've talked about it significantly, but just to give a more of a practical step to start. First, you need to have a kind of a mapping, develop your donor mapping or your resource mapping, have a simple map of who are my potential donors. So when you have the map, first design as an organization, do a kind of study around what are the available opportunities locally and internationally, and any, like, just a bigger picture of everywhere you think you can be able to have a fund. From there, from that donor or mapping, source of fund mapping, you can begin from there to take the next step of, okay, do a kind of go around those opportunities or potential partners you see. Do a self-assessment as an institution. Are we well positioned to get funding from, let's say, US government directly? Are we well positioned to get funding from UK government, from private sector in Nigeria? So you must, first of all, know your own strength. As much as you put this map out there, put together the map of possible sources of fund, you need to also do a kind of SWOT analysis to understand your capacity as an institution. So what can we be able to do? How well positioned are we to go for this opportunity? And now, so with the knowledge or understanding of who you are as an institution, what capacity you have to be able to develop proposal or engage effectively with this potential donor and convince them to fund your initiative. On that ground, you now start, okay, how do we what step? You can now take the next step of engaging with this partner. So maybe some of them will put out put out a call, solicited fund. Others, you can take this giant step of of approaching them with your concept as an unsolicited application. Putting up together your concept and share with them, sell yourself, let them understand that you have the capacity and willing to do this. But you must also understand the priorities and the focus of this donor you are looking at, because every donor will have priorities, have areas of focus that they would want to fund. So there must be an alignment between your concept, between your institutional focus, your concept or proposal with what the potential donor is interested in. So having established that, you can now maybe put together a concept and put it forward. But notwithstanding, it's also critical for you as an institution to ensure that you first address internal capacity, because from your SWOT analysis, you should be able to understand the gap and the opportunity you have, or maybe your strength as an institution. So it will be a disaster for you to receive a fund that you don't have the capacity to manage it, because by the time you receive a funding that you don't have capacity to manage it, you may end up destroying your system. You may end up destroying your system completely, because your outcome, your result will be a critical determinant for next opportunity that you'll be applying for, because every donor coming to engage with you will want to do some level of due diligence, will want to take some steps to understand how was your previous relationship with your previous partner, and see how they can build off that relationship to engage with you. So critically, understand your own strength, address the gap internally, then take the step of moving forward. That is after you have done the mapping of your potential donor and alignment, and do a kind of go-no-go analysis to identify areas that you can be able to, donors that you have aligning priorities and you are well seated to be able to attract or convince them to fund you. So I think these are the areas I would suggest as a practical step, but most importantly, also looking beyond the traditional or international kind of donor. I have always talked to colleagues from the civil society space that do not put your energy more, try to look beyond putting your energy on the big name donors. There are opportunities, simple funding opportunity, in fact, very flexible ones. Some could be as small as low as 2,000 USD, 1,000 USD, 5,000 USD. This small amount of funding, if you are intentional around looking for such kind of opportunities, and if you're able to, let's say, mobilize this, it may sound very small, but mobilizing this kind of fund, it will help you to keep your state system in place, keep your system going, keep yourself going as an institution, and continue to reach out to the most vulnerable population who are your key target within the limited resources, and still remain sustainable over a period of time when you are maybe prepare you more for the bigger kind of multi-year kind of funding that you might be much interested in attracting over time. So start from the little, start from understanding your strength, start from mapping out the potential opportunity and analyzing how best you are suitable to apply for those opportunity, then before taking the next step. But do not look far away. I know I've engaged with many partners that I know how much you have been doing with the limited, even self-generated fund, like self-funded intervention that partner CSOs have been doing at different contexts in Nigeria. Yes, you can also leverage on this philanthropic support from well-meaning Nigerians around you who are willing to contribute into supporting you. So don't just look at the bigger one. Start from even the smaller one while you are growing and working towards the bigger one. And at the same time, remain accountable, because this is the most important thing. If you're not accountable, if you are not transparent with your funding, if you're not accountable, you are not transparent with your funding, you will be a kind of building yourself or preparing yourself for an auto destruction. Thank you, and over to you, Indonesia.
Thank you so much, Ada, for that. Thank you so much, Ada, for that. Particularly, the accountability part is also very, very important. As you're collecting money from private donors, from private philanthropists, and all that, make sure that you're accountable in how you spend the money, because all these are going to be important for you as you grow your organization and you speak with bigger donors. I don't know if Mr. Yebisi is back online, because a lot of people are asking about. Okay, so a lot of people are asking about social enterprise, and then how to marry that with the current situation with KAMA and being a non-profit organization. I'm also curious myself, because I'm aware that with social enterprises, you're not expected, or your goal is not to generate a profit, right? You have other ways of measuring your success as an organization. Are non-profits, as defined by Nigerian law, allowed to engage in social enterprise? And if that is not so, you spoke about advocacy to allow things like this to be possible. So maybe you can just walk us through that.
So the law that we all are bounded by majorly is a Part F of KAMA, which is the incorporated trustees. Under incorporated trustees, you only have charitable or ecclesiastical purposes, meaning that you're not allowed to trade in terms of the full implementation of Part F of KAMA. Now, when you register under Part B is our limited by guarantee, which first gives you that company veil. Then you can then advance that to social enterprise, to a non-profit. And social enterprises are also within the non-profit family. Now, the beauty of a social enterprise is that you can run as a business, but only use 20% of your business in terms of sharing your profit, or you plow a certain percentage back. We're not clear what it is under Part B and how CAC is implementing that, but in most climes, a majority part of your income derived from profit is plowed back into the activities of the organization. And that is why under Part B, one person can start an organization. So what I'm alluding to is that given the challenges we now have and the opportunities that follow it, is that we need to sit down with the Corporate Affairs Commission. And the Corporate Affairs Commission, there are organizations that are interested in moving from incorporated trustees to Part B. How do we navigate seamlessly without losing the name and some of the trademarks that we are bringing from our incorporated trustees status? Because, once you want to move outside of one registration to another registration, you have to wind down properly on that one before you move to the next. But can we have a conversation and a regulation? And this is where effective regulation comes in, and also government civil society collaboration in terms of how do we ensure that we protect civil society from dying as a result of not having access to funding, or better still, as a result of also wanting to expand the funding base that helps us to be able to support government in its drive to help the common man or to provide support to citizens. So it's going to be a long walk to freedom because, again, as a sector, sometimes we do not have that deepened understanding on how some of these things would work. But again, within the respect for different opinions, which is valid under democracy, we have to have that national conversation and also have a set of individuals that would bath this conversation with CAC, but also provide some statistics and science to why this is a good regulatory focus for CAC, as it were. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Oluseyi. So that is something that we can take from this conversation and see how for next steps, part of what we can look at as next steps, see how we can advocate for this and come up with an advocacy strategy to see how we can go forward with some of the suggestions that you've made in terms of social enterprise versus non-profit organizations and CAMA. So thank you very much for that. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. We have an attendance form, so please just help us to fill out the attendance form, which is on the chat box there, for us to know those who have attended and have that in our records. So we have to close now, but before we go around with our panelists to have last say just 1 minute to talk about what we've discussed here and any thoughts about how we can move forward, going forward in terms of our organizations and how we can fund them going forward. So we'll start with Mr. Peter.
Thank you so much again. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. Just to say that we just have to work collaboratively more with other partners, sectors, both private sector and the public sector. And I'm happy our colleague from the government end is on ground already, hitting the ground running. So we want to see more collaboration with the INGOs, the NGOs, and the government agencies. So he talked about whether if there's a relationship or working relationship between the CSOs and the government agencies. I think I can attest to that in Adamawa State, for instance. We are working closely with the government on the durable solutions, and the CSOs are key integral part of the durable solution implementing structure in the state. But what we can do more now as CSOs generally in Nigeria or globally as local NGO is for us to start thinking innovatively what we can do differently. And I'm happy OABC has laid the background that we have to look at those laws that does not enable us do some level of business. And that means that, for instance, we can, as NGOs, take up third-party monitoring. This is something we do always. We go to the field, we can be third-party monitoring to government policies, government projects. We can be consultants. We do that a lot at our individual level. So organizations that have skills in M&E, have skills in proposal writing, have skills in data analysis and capture, can actually do these things pro bono and get these funds to sustain the organization. And above all, we must keep our organization intact by building our skills, our capacities, our expertise, and also making sure that all the structures that is needed to operate a formidable organization is in place. And that means adhering to the law, putting our books in order, be transparent and accountable to our donors, our community, and government as well. Over, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Is ST around? ST, do you want to go next?
Yes, I wanted to just mention one other thing about the importance of local NGOs and CSOs, is that you have the ability to influence the agenda and influence the priorities of what is needed in your own context and in your own environment, and to work closely with the government. It's the partnership that is between the government and the non-government organizations. And again, as I mentioned before, what you're trying to achieve is an environment that does not have international NGOs or UN agencies. So just imagine that world where there are no NGOs or there are no UN agencies, and it's just you that has the best capacity, that has the best knowledge, that has the best expertise, that has the best technical capacity, and you are the one that's driving the agenda, not the funders, not the external foreign aid, because I think what we're talking about right now is external foreign aid, and we shouldn't be talking about external foreign aid. I know that's what the context is right now, the drying up of external foreign aid. And I said at the very beginning, it's global. That drying up of external foreign aid is right now global. So it's not just Nigeria context. So we all need to figure out how to do it within internally, whether it's the government funding, whether it's private sector, whether it's foundations of private sector in their CSR, corporate social responsibility programs, whether it's the high net worth individuals who are just philanthropists who are very, 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 very rich, and the diaspora, those who care about the Nigerians in their own country and they're elsewhere. And your consortiums that you were talking about, because there are so many different levels of NGOs who are anywhere else. But the point here is it shouldn't be driven by what donors think are important. If you think education is the most important thing in the country, then you should be the ones advocating to say that education is the most important thing in the country and the money should be invested in education. If you think it's the protection of women's rights or the girl child, then it should be the civil society who are influencing that. And driving the program of what's needed in the country. That I think is also the importance of civil society movements and the importance of NGOs. And I think I mentioned this before when it was in Lebanon. It was the oil spill emergency, and there's a emergency team called the UNDAC, which is the United Nations Disaster Assessment and Coordination Team, that flies in from outside, right? As one would if there was an earthquake or if there was a flood, if it was a large scale emergency. And they were establishing a coordination mechanism. But they said, well, where are the partners? You know, there are no partners coming to their coordination meeting. Because actually the local NGOs were holding their own coordination meetings outside. That's how it should be. They were not coming to the international coordination meetings. They were holding their own, and that had more participation than the international ones. That's what it should be. The local coordination mechanism should be the one that's much more dominant than any external international coordination mechanism, and that's what it should always be like. So any foreign or external mechanism or any foreign or external funding should be a supplement, or should be something that is driven by what is a priority by the knowledge that is within the country. So that's where I would hope that the CSOs and the local NGOs here are building towards. I hope that is the true meaning of not localization, but local ownership and local leadership is what we're trying to build towards. Thank you.
Thank you, Esti. So we'll move next to Ada. Ada, any closing words from you?
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Ndubisi. Thank you, everyone, especially my colleagues on the panel. For me, I think a lot have been said, and a lot is, I mean, the important thing is to take those things to action. So one important aspect I would want to reiterate, in addition to what other colleagues have said, is the private sector funding, and tying it to what ST said earlier around capacity. I have mentioned over and over again, and also leveraging, building on what Susan said, building capacity. A lot of funds have been invested in building capacity of CSOs and local partners, but then this capacity keep, after months or 6 months, a year, thereabout, this capacity and such organization go back to more of where they started from. So in my opinion, like, I would want to see that as an outcome of this engagement, that and I'm happy that Peter is part of this engagement, being a long-standing member of the humanitarian country team for representing the local actors and other colleague of his that are on the humanitarian country team. My opinion is to go back and revisit the experience of 2018 private sector's partnership with the Nigerian Humanitarian Fund, to see how they can learn from this that approach. I know there are some challenges around our approach, especially from how, who, and where the fund should be seated. But leveraging from that experience, learn from it, and come up with a Nigerian localization pool fund, a fund that can provide resources for local actors to translate these capacities into practice so that it can be sustainable in the system. If and I can totally understand the fact that our private sector are more attuned or more interested in engaging with international organization and all that, but building up the experience and partnership with colleagues from the UN agencies and the NGOs, you can the local actors can coordinate themselves and champion that process with the of the like of UN and the like, to engage strategically with private sector to mobilize and design system that is learning from the humanitarian pool fund that is currently working effectively in Nigeria, to design something like similar that can that can target mobilizing resources from the local private sectors as well as philanthropies, which will create a kind of system for local actors to have readily available funds that they can access and continue to make impact for the most vulnerable population we are serving, as well as continue to build a more sustainable system. So for me, I will be happy to see that this does not stop as a dialogue in this platform only, but is translated into action. And this action can only be led by the local actors themselves. And I always push it to Peter and his team that we can take this forward and start up something. And it will be nice, and it will be a great thing to see this come into reality. Thank you, and over to you in the BC.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ada, for that. So we'll let the government have the last word. Mr. Mohammed, please take the floor.
Thank you so much, and the esteemed panelists, I think, have really highlighted the core of this conversation. So let me just reiterate, I think, key highlights for me before I give my own remarks. I think from Mr. Oebisi, the main thing I highlighted from his remarks were the need for policy innovation. I think this is critical for all stakeholders, government, academia, civil society, private sector. Everyone needs to adopt innovative ways of doing things. From Etsy, I think she highlighted the need for civil society to be the advocates that will influence and shape conversations and policies and priorities and ensuring government accountability. I strongly support that. Ada's remarks were on strengthening public-private partnerships and the role of private sector. He suggested revisiting the 2018 humanitarian funding basket model and targeting sustainable capacity building. I think this is something that you can tap on UN OCHA. In other countries, they have a platform called the Connecting Business Initiative. And it's a wonderful initiative that I think can be replicated in Nigeria. Peter highlighted how civil society, again, similar to Mr. ABC, need to be innovative, especially in how they provide support to government and society. And he also highlighted the need for continuous learning and capacity building within their own institutions. So I would like to close by mentioning and reminding us all, because we all know this, that I think in order not to remain in a cycle of continuous humanitarian intervention, I think what all of us would like to see, both as a government, as a people in Nigeria and globally, is moving away from humanitarian intervention and moving towards development. And I think this highlights the notion of the human development peace nexus. And I think in terms of government priorities, we need to really put more effort into ensuring strengthened health systems, stronger education, stronger, better built infrastructure, and across board, just ensuring development in the spaces where our vulnerable communities exist, and to ensure that they are less vulnerable to disaster and any sort of crises. So I'd like to wrap up with that, and I thank you once again for this opportunity to contribute on this platform. Thank you. Over to you, Andy.
I think he has some network challenge. He will join shortly.
Hello. Sorry, I think my network threw me off. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can hear you.
So yeah, sorry, I think
We can hear you. You can continue. But now we can't.
The network decided to go down just at the ending when we needed his final.
Yes.
We can't hear you now.
yes, sorry, they threw me off again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a network issue. So I will just round off. I will just round up now because I don't know if it's going to throw me off again. But I want to thank everybody. I want to use this opportunity to thank everybody that attended. I want to thank the panelists. I also want to thank the participants as well. We really love this conversation. It's a great conversation to have. I wish we could hear more from the participants, but unfortunately we ran out of time. I believe we should do this again. For next steps, we have a rapporteur, be rapporteur, and she's going to Constance. Constance is going to help us with taking down what all the panelists and the participants have said today, and we'll share it with the. Please register if you have not registered, so that we can have your email addresses, and we can also share what we discussed. We want this to be an ongoing conversation, at least once again this year. Probably after a couple months has passed by, we'll have another conversation to see what has happened since our last discussion, and we'll also invite everybody that attended. Very important things that were mentioned. I particularly like what Esti said. If we do not have the international organizations, if we do not have the UN, how would we move forward as a nation in terms of supporting our local organizations, our CSOs? A lot of suggestions were given in the conversations. People spoke about philanthropic organizations. We talked about working closer with governments. We talked about social enterprise. How do we advocate for social enterprises to be, for it to be easier for local enterprises to work with our non-profits? And then also consortiums, the small organizations, how can they come together to deliver work? Those are some things that I noted. And with that, I'd say thank you, everybody. We are 12 minutes. We're 12 minutes over our time. I don't think that's too bad. A lot of people are very busy, but I didn't even notice the 2 hours fly by. So that means it was a very serious and interesting conversation. So with that, we'll say goodbye to everybody, and we'll let you know whenever we convene the next conversation. We'll reach out to everybody again. And then we'll also share notes from the conversation. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Please fill the attendance form if you are yet to do so before you exit the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye. Hello, Constance.
Hello.
Good to hear from you
Thank you.
today.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you. Bye.